Hola, ¿qué tal, querida comunidad? Bienvenidos sean ustedes a esta charla sorpresa. Ahí dice charla sabatina, en realidad es charla dominical, porque pues hoy es el día de las infancias de las niñas y los niños en nuestro país. Y por eso nos pusimos de acuerdo con nuestros amigos de Penguin Random House para entrevistar a una autora que aquí nos gusta mucho. Ella es Maureen McQuerry y es la responsable detrás de esta increíble serie que ya les hemos recomendado de grandes ideas para pequeños filósofos. El año pasado les recomendamos estos dos, Igualdad con Simone de Beauvoir, Imaginación con René Descartes. Me da mucho gusto anunciarles que ya están también Felicidad con Aristóteles. Y también está Verdad con Sócrates. Es una serie imperdible que acerca la filosofía a las infancias y pues como tuvimos la oportunidad de platicar con la autora, no quisimos desaprovecharla para que ustedes puedan enterarse de todo lo que hay detrás de esta maravillosa serie y se vayan corriendo en este momento si todavía no compran el regalo del pequeño que tienen en casa o también para el pequeño que tienen dentro, se pueden ir corriendo ahorita a las librerías. Vámonos entonces a platicar con Maureen McQuerry. Esta charla, ya lo habrán imaginado, es grabada. No vamos a tener, por lo tanto, la posibilidad de hacerle sus preguntas, pero ella los espera en redes sociales en caso de que la quieran contactar, porque bueno, tuvimos que subtitularla, así que es una charla grabada. Disfrútenla. Nos vemos al final. Hi, Maureen. Thank you for doing this interview. We're so happy to have you in this YouTube channel where we love books and we love children's books as well. And of course, we love philosophy. So thank you so much for sitting here and having a chat with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about the books.
Well, I'm excited about this too because we recommended the first two books last year and we were very excited about them because, we behind the scenes who do this channel, we're all into social sciences, we're historians, and so to us it was very interesting to see that philosophy could be talked about in children's books. And at first it may seem something very strange, but if you think about it, if there's children's books about history or about art, why not philosophy as well? I think it really helps to develop children's critical thinking. I found that very interesting as we were looking through the books. So they really are great books for children. And I wanted to know first, how did the idea of the Little Philosopher Theory series develop?
Well, it's interesting because I usually write books for older children and for adults, and I'd never done books for this age group before. But I had a grandson, and so I was spending a lot of time in the picture book section of bookstores. And at that time, there were a lot of books about science for children, and they were kind of tongue-in-cheek. They were things like nuclear physics for babies and coding for babies, but there weren't any books about how to live well and how to be a good human. So I thought it would be really interesting, since philosophers have explored these ideas and questions for hundreds of years. I thought it would be wonderful to see if we could distill some of their ideas down and make it simple enough for children to understand and talk about. So I pitched the idea to my agent, and she was excited about it, and we took it to several different editors and had interest from 3 or 4 different publishing houses. And one thing that we wanted to make sure is that we also ran it by and included a philosophy professor as well, to make sure that we were staying true to the philosophers. And several of the publishers made an offer, and from there, and then the publisher found a wonderful illustrator, Robin Rosenthal, and she kind of brought it all together, kid-friendly illustrations, and that's where the idea started.
And so why do you think that children should be familiarized with philosophy at such a young age? Because sometimes we think about these things like, high school, even university level? Why do books that, reach out to children that are 4 years old or above 4 years old?
Well, children are natural philosophers because they are always asking questions and wondering. And philosophy starts with curiosity and wonder. And as adults, it's really important for us to support and encourage that kind of curiosity with children, because curiosity leads them beyond their own viewpoint and will help them develop empathy and understanding of the world around them. So they're already asking questions, and it's a great place to start. But it's never too kids are never too young to talk about big ideas like kindness and um, how you truth, love, compassion, those kinds of ideas. You can start talking to children at a very young age about that, because children know what it's like to feel loved. They
Hmm.
understand how scary it can be to all of these things that they may not have words for yet are things that they're familiar with. So if you can distill it down in language that's age appropriate, it's a great time to start.
Well, that's right. Children are always asking why. And that's really the basis of philosophy.
It is, yeah. And so we tried to make the books really interactive, so that it's not a biography of the philosophers, but it's the big ideas. What did the philosophers really wonder and talk about? And so we wanted questions throughout the book for children to explore things like, what does a friend do? What's something you wonder about? How can you be helpful today? So the children get engaged with some of the big ideas.
And in that sense, you were talking about, adapting language for it to be age appropriate. So, what were the main challenges for you adapting the ideas of these great philosophers of the past for children of the present?
I think a couple of things. One is distilling it down to one or two main concepts from each of the philosophers, and then finding a way to use age appropriate, not just language, but examples for children, like sharing toys, or how you treat a friend, or how you are kind to an animal or something in the environment. So, trying to make it very relevant to their experience. And then also bringing in an illustrator who can show the children what some of these things look like. She did a wonderful job of bringing in diversity of children, bringing in situations that children would be involved in, and they're colorful and detailed pictures. So all of those help tell the story, ask the questions as well.
And in this process of adapting these ideas, how did you work with Dwayne Armitage, who's the philosopher who was, as you mentioned at the start, was helping you be true to what these philosophers and what their ideas were about?
I think it was really important to work with Dwayne in terms of just distilling down the ideas, and deciding which one we would represent with each philosopher, because philosophers had a large body of work. And so choosing kindness, when we talked about Confucius, and happiness with Aristotle, those were things that were really true to the core of their philosophy, and yet they were simple enough and relatable enough that we could use those for children. So that was the process we really discussed together, how to do.
And then you were talking about big ideas, how children can relate to these big ideas that these philosophers develop throughout their work. And why do you think then that these big ideas are still relevant today? Because we're talking about, like, I have here Descartes, Simone de Beauvoir, well, she's a bit more closer to us, but then, there's here Aristotle. So, what does Aristotle have to say to a child today?
Well, so with Aristotle, we focused on happiness. But I guess what I would say to that is that the world changes in terms of science and technology, but the human condition doesn't change. We all have and share the same hopes and fears and dreams for our lives. and so do children. And so philosophers are talking about the things that make us human. And they're talking about who, where people come from, what matters, how do you live well, how do you treat other people and the environment that you live in. And so those are ideas that are universal and they span time. And today, we face so many challenges in our world. We need people who have thought deeply about these ideas so that they can make ethical decisions to face these kinds of challenges. So I think philosophy is something that never goes out of style. Um, it's relevant for all different ages and all different time periods.
And what would you like for readers to learn from the series?
That's a good question. I think I would want them to know that it's never too early to start talking about these ideas with children, and that as adults, um, curiosity and wonder are contagious. And if we model that with children, children are going to pick up on that, and they're going to want to wonder and be curious with us. And that conversations are important. One of the things about these books is you can read them with children of different ages, and the adult having the conversation with the children can ask questions that apply to the child at that age. And so I guess I want people to know that these are ideas that can be visited and revisited throughout a person's life. And as we grow, we understand more about what it means to live as a good human and live in community and take care of the world around us.
And Maureen, I was wondering a bit about that question I made earlier about, why these ideas are still relevant today, and the challenges of adapting these ideas to a contemporary child. I was just thinking, which was the hardest for you?
Ooh, which of the philosophers?
Yeah. Which one would you say was the most challenging?
Well, I think probably that Descartes was difficult in that imagination is very abstract. And so, talking about imagination with children, imagination is something that happens largely inside ourselves, inside our minds. And so, coming up with concrete examples for that was challenging because it's not something that the others are direct interactions with people, like kindness or truthfulness, friendship, those kinds of things. So that was challenging. And I think equality was challenging as well. Finding good examples that children could understand about treating people fairly and treating people the same, no matter what they like. So those two were a little bit more abstract, and that just made them a little bit more challenging.
Right. And Maureen, from what I've seen on your website, you have other series now of these big ideas. In Mexico, I think we just have the big ideas for little philosophers. But I see that now you have environmentalists as well. There's now a series about this. So I don't know if you want to briefly comment or tell us something about this other series, which I think is very interesting because if there's one subject that we can definitely say that is relevant today is the conservation of our environment.
Yeah, and that's really why that became the next in the series. Again, I wanted to explore what are the things that motivated some of the environmentalists that shaped the environmental movement in our world today. And so, very similar to the philosophy books, Big Ideas for Little Environmentalists are interactive, and they ask children questions and help them explore their relationship to animals and the natural world. I like to say that environmentalists aren't born, that they are created through understanding and asking questions. And so hopefully these books will encourage children to grow up and be really aware of and concerned for their environment as well as for people.
And Maureen, just to close this conversation, I was also wondering how you feel about having these books translated to other languages, like, Spanish. Here we are talking about the books. I'm in Mexico City, here in Washington State. But, how do you feel about readers all around the world learning about figures as Aristotle, Descartes, Simone de Beauvoir through your books?
It is so exciting. And it was very, very exciting. I got to see a couple of the books in Spanish. The publisher sent me a few copies, and it was so exciting to see that. And then the other ones I haven't actually seen physical copies of, but I know it's in about 5 or 6 languages now. And sometimes people will post young children reading them. And I've seen some in Korea, and I've seen some from Germany. And it's just really fun to see children reading and asking these big questions, and adults engaged in conversation with them, all with the ideas that are in these books. So very exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, it just speaks to to how universal these ideas are.
They really are. It's that whole thing of we all have the same hopes and fears and dreams, and we're all looking for kindness and friendship and all of the things that these books really discuss and help children to understand and develop in their lives. So, yeah, very universal.
Well, Maureen, thank you so much for having a chat with us. I'm sure my followers will be very, very happy to, learn more about these books. I know there was a lot of excitement when I recommended them. A lot of people who follow me have kids of their own, and they're always looking for things to read with them. So I'm sure they will all be very happy to see this interview. And if they have any questions, is there somewhere where they can send you an email or find you on social media?
Sure. So to send me an email, the easiest way is to go through my website, which is just MaureenMcQuerry.com. But I'm available on Twitter and on Instagram, and I also am under author Maureen McQuerry on Facebook.
Great, great. So I'm sure people will be contacting you if they have any questions. And thank you again. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I really enjoyed the books. I'm really excited to see if the Environmentalist series comes to Mexico as well. Maybe that can be a hint for Penguin Random House over here to get them over as soon as possible. And well, thank you again. And it was lovely speaking to you.
Thanks so much, Zika. I really appreciate it.
See you soon. Bye. Bueno, pues ahí lo tienen, querida comunidad. Espero hayan disfrutado esta charla con Maureen McQuerry tanto como yo. A mí me pareció interesantísimo escuchar cómo fue que surgió esta serie y por qué plantearle las preguntas de los grandes filósofos de la historia a las infancias desde tan pequeña edad. Así que pues ahí lo tienen. Ya está disponible la serie en las librerías mexicanas. Está Verdad con Sócrates, Felicidad con Aristóteles, Imaginación con René Descartes y Igualdad con Simone de Beauvoir. Si no los tienen todavía, vayan corriendo a las librerías. Quizá haya algunos de ustedes que aún no tienen el regalo para su pequeño en casa o lo quieren comprar simplemente para el pequeño que tienen dentro. De verdad, no tienen desperdicio. Tienen que irlos a buscar ya. Yo los espero aquí, como siempre, el martes para seguir con las recomendaciones. Y no se les olvide darle like, comentar y compartir este video. Ya saben que ahí les estamos respondiendo siempre todas sus dudas, comentarios, sugerencias e incluso también las quejas. Nos vemos prontito. Bye.